The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 5 kilometers of living crystal. Its walls pulsed with soft light, and its ceiling displayed the real-time positions of every star system under Council authority. 17,000 worlds, 800 species, an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 300,000 years. Ambassador Elena Voss stood at the entrance. Her simple gray uniform, a sharp contrast to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the alien delegates around her. She was the last human in Council space. Everyone else had vanished 18 months ago. The Council had summoned her to answer for that. Disappearance.High. Chancellor Morath of Veldrani hegemony sat at the center of the ruling platform. His serpentine body coiled around a throne of polished obsidian. His species had founded the Council. They had never been challenged. Ambassador Voss, Morath said, his voice carrying through translators to every corner of the vast chamber. Your species has committed an act of unprecedented defiance. Your colonies stand empty. Your trade routes are abandoned. Your people have simply ... vanished. Elena walked forward, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. 800 species watched her approach. Some were ancient beings of light and energy. Others were massive creatures of stone and metal. All of them looked at the lone human with a mixture of contempt and curiosity. We received your summons, High Chancellor, Elena said calmly. I am here to respond. Then respond. Delegate Vreth of the Collective clicked her mandibles impatiently. Her insectoid species controlled the Council's military forces. Where are your people? Where have 8 billion humans gone? Elena stopped at the speaking platform. She looked up at the assembled delegates, meeting their alien eyes without fear. Before I answer, I must ask the Council a question. She paused. Do you know why we left? Laughter rippled through the chamber. Ambassador Corlin of the Lithan Assembly, a being of living granite who had existed for 4,000 years, leaned forward with grinding amusement. You left because you are weak, Corlin said. Young species always break when they realize they cannot compete with the established order. It is the natural way of things? Is that what you believe? Elena asked. It is what we know. Your kind served us well for 3 centuries. You patrolled the outer reaches. You fought the void swarms while our fleets remained safe in core territory. And when the burden grew too heavy, you collapsed. Corlin spread his massive stone hands. We are not surprised. We are merely disappointed. Elena nodded slowly. I see. Then you are not aware of Council Directive 7412 Omega. The chamber went quiet. High Chancellor Morath's eyes narrowed. That document is classified at the highest level. How do you know its designation? I know more than its designation, High Chancellor. I know its contents. Elena reached into her uniform and produced a small data crystal. Directive 7412 Omega, authorized by this Council 18 months ago. It orders the complete sterilization of Earth and the genetic termination of the human species. We were scheduled for extinction within the next 50 years. Chaos erupted. Delegates shouted accusations and denials. Some demanded to know how humans had breached Council security. Others called for Elena's immediate arrest, but Elena simply stood there, waiting. High Chancellor Morath raised his hand for silence. When the chamber finally quieted, he spoke with cold precision. Even if this document exists, it changes nothing. The Council has the authority to manage species that pose a threat to galactic stability. Your people were deemed too aggressive, too unpredictable. The decision was made for the greater good. I understand, Elena said. That is exactly why humanity vanished. She raised her hand, and the chamber's display systems activated without any visible command. The star map above them shifted, zooming past Council territory, past the outer reaches. Into the unexplored void, beyond charted space, something emerged from the darkness. Ships. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. They poured from the black like a tide of cold fire, each one bearing the insignia of United Earth. The chamber fell into stunned silence. For 18 months, Elena continued, every human on every world has been working toward a single purpose. We emptied our colonies. We abandoned our stations. We redirected every resource, every mind, every heartbeat into construction yards hidden beyond your sensor range. The fleet kept growing on the display. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons. Carrier vessels holding millions of fighters. Ships of designs no council species had ever seen. You planned to destroy us quietly, Elena said. We decided to give you a reason to reconsider. Delegate Vref found her voice first. This is impossible. Our surveillance detected no construction activity. Our intelligence services reported your civilization in collapse. Your intelligence services reported what we wanted them to see. Elena turned to face the insectoid delegate directly. Humanity has spent 3 centuries learning from this council. We learned how you think, how you plan, how you eliminate threats. And we learned one thing above all else. She paused, letting the silence stretch. We learned that you only respect strength. The tactical display began calculating fleet numbers. 400,000 combat vessels. 300 dreadnought-class warships. And something else, something the sensors could not identify. Something vast and terrible lurking at the fleet's heart. Ambassador Corlin rose slowly from his seat, his ancient stone body trembling. You would threaten the Galactic Council? We are 800 species. We have ruled this galaxy for 300,000 years. And in all that time, Elena replied, has anyone ever done what we just did? No one answered. High Chancellor Morath stared at the display, his serpentine features unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its commanding tone. What do you want, Ambassador? Elena clasped her hands behind her back. The fleet will reach Council borders in 72 hours. You have until then to decide what happens next. Humanity is done asking for permission to exist. We are done serving an empire that planned to murder us the moment we were no longer useful. She turned and walked toward the chamber's exit. You cannot simply leave, Morath called after her. We have not concluded this session. Elena paused at the threshold. She looked back at the most powerful governing body in the galaxy, at 800 species who had never known fear, and she smiled. You concluded it 18 months ago when you signed our death warrant. This is simply the consequence. She stepped through the doors and disappeared. Behind her, the grand chamber remained frozen. The tactical display continued its terrible count, numbers climbing higher with each passing second. The fleet that was not supposed to exist kept emerging from the void, patient and silent and endless. High Chancellor Morath spoke one word into the silence. Impossible. But the evidence hung above them. Undeniable and growing. Humanity had not died. Humanity had been preparing. And now, for the first time in 300,000 years, the Galactic Council faced something it had forgotten how to handle. A species that refused to disappear quietly. 18 months earlier, Ambassador Marcus Webb had sat in his office at the human embassy. Reading a document that would change everything. The data crystal had arrived through channels that did not officially exist. Marcus had spent 40 years building relationships throughout Council space, trading favors and information, earning trust one careful step at a time. Those connections had finally paid off in the worst possible way. Directive 7412 Omega was written in the clinical language of bureaucracy. It discussed genetic cataloging protocols and population reduction timelines. It mentioned the redistribution of Earth's resources among contributing council members. It described humanity not as a species of 8 billion souls, but as a problem to be solved. Marcus read it 3 times. His hands did not shake. He had suspected something like this for years, but suspicion and certainty were very different things. His aide, a young woman named Nadia, stood in the doorway. "Sir, you asked me to bring the secure communication equipment." Marcus looked up at her. Nadia was 28 years old. According to this document, she would not live to see 50. "Contact Admiral Reyes," Marcus said quietly. "Tell him the Exodus protocol is active." 3 days later, beneath the frozen surface of Europa, the Shadow Council of Humanity convened. This was not Earth's official government. This was something older and more secret. Since first contact with the Council 3 centuries ago, a small group of humans had maintained contingency plans for the day when diplomacy failed. They called themselves the Keepers. Admiral Thomas Reyes commanded humanity's hidden military infrastructure. He was a large man with gray hair and steady hands, a veteran of the Void Wars who had watched too many humans die defending Council borders. "The Prometheus files are ready," Reyes announced to the assembled leaders. 17 construction sites beyond Council sensor range. 3 centuries of accumulated technology. Enough resources to build a fleet that can challenge the established order. Dr. Amara Okafor, chief scientist of the program, pulled up a holographic display. "We have been reverse engineering recovered technology for generations. The Volscian archive alone gave us jump drive improvements that exceed Council capabilities by 40%. The Volscian had been exterminated by the Council 4,000 years ago. Their crime had been developing technology that threatened Veldrani dominance. But they had hidden caches of their knowledge throughout the galaxy, waiting to be found by whoever came after. Humanity had been listening. How long to build a credible deterrent force?" asked Director Helena Cross, head of covert operations. "Full mobilization in 18 months, Reyes replied. "But it requires everything. Every colony stripped. Every civilian redirected to construction. Every ship we have moving people and resources to the hidden sites." Marcus Webb spoke for the first time. "The Council will notice. They will investigate. That is where we control the narrative," Director Cross said. "We do not just disappear. We collapse. Trade delegations report market failures. Military observers see ships returning to port and not leaving. The embassy staff thins gradually. Everything looks like a civilization falling apart. They will believe it because they expect it," Marcus said slowly. "Young species always break." "Exactly." The vote was taken. The decision was unanimous. Operation Quiet Sky began. Over the following months, humanity performed the greatest disappearing act in galactic history. It started slowly, carefully. A colony on the outer reaches announced economic difficulties and requested reduced trade obligations. Council observers noted the request and filed it away. Standard procedure. 3 weeks later, another colony went dark. And another. Trade ships stopped arriving at scheduled ports. Human military patrols began missing their assigned routes. Council intelligence agencies prepared reports describing a civilization in freefall. The analysts were experienced. They had seen this pattern before. Young species often expanded too quickly, stretched themselves too thin, and collapsed under the weight of their own ambition. No one thought to question the narrative because no one could imagine the alternative. On a construction platform in the void, beyond mapped space, Chief Engineer David Okafor watched the first dreadnought take shape. He was Amara's son, trained from childhood for this moment. "Production is running 12% above projections," reported his assistant. "AO, we have integrated the Volscian reactor design successfully." David nodded. The ship before him was unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Where Council vessels prioritized elegance and tradition, this dreadnought was built for one purpose: survival. heavy armor, redundant systems, weapons designed to penetrate shields that had protected Council fleets for millennia. How many workers do we have now? David asked. 2 billion across all sites. More arriving every day. 2 billion people. Scientists working assembly lines. Teachers programming construction drones. Children sorting components alongside their parents. Every human who could contribute was contributing. This was not just a military operation. This was a species fighting for its right to exist. Back in Council space, Helena Voss led the Ghost Network. She had been a diplomat's daughter, trained in protocol and procedure. Then she had discovered her talent for other kinds of work. She moved through Council territory, like smoke, maintaining the illusion of humanity's collapse. False reports. Staged communications. Evidence of economic failure planted where Council analysts would find it. She met with her most valuable contact on the Veldrani homeworld. A disgraced archivist named Scholar Merrick. His species had ruled the Council since its founding. He had spent his life studying their history. Every promising young species, Merrick told her, his luminescent eyes troubled. The Volscian, the Karith, the Hollow Minds, all eliminated before they could challenge the established order. This has been happening for 300,000 years. Why are you helping us? Elena asked. Marek was quiet for a long moment. Because I believe someone should survive to tell the truth about what the Council really is. He gave her a data crystal containing troop deployments, defensive positions, and the locations of Council listening posts throughout the galaxy. Information that would prove invaluable when the time came. On Earth, the last transports departed from silent cities. The planet that had birthed humanity stood empty, waiting. Ambassador Marcus Webb was among the final evacuees. He stood on the observation deck as Earth grew smaller behind him, a blue marble suspended in darkness. He was 74 years old. He would likely not live to see the fleet's return. But his granddaughter Elena would. That was enough. In the hidden construction yards, the count continued. 50,000 ships. 100,000. 200,000. The Council celebrated what they believed was humanity's death. They toasted their intelligence services. They discussed how to divide Earth's resources among the member species. Did not think to wonder where 8 billion people had actually gone. They would learn soon enough. The flagship that would carry humanity home. Admiral Reyes stood before the assembled command staff. In 6 months, he said, we return to Council space. We do not go to negotiate. We do not go to beg. We go to show them what humanity is capable of when our survival is at stake. He looked at the tactical display showing their growing fleet. They taught us that the galaxy belongs to the strong. Now we prove that we were paying attention. The officers saluted. Preparations continued, and in the darkness between stars, 400,000 ships waited for the order to move. The Grand Chamber had descended into chaos within minutes of Elena's departure. Delegate Vreth screamed for immediate military action, her compound eyes blazing with fury. Ambassador Corlin demanded an emergency session of the War Council. High Chancellor Morith sat motionless on his throne, watching his empire begin to crack. 300,000 years of unchallenged authority. 800 species united under Veldrani leadership. And now, for the first time in recorded history, someone had looked the Council in the eye and refused to blink. We must strike now, Vreth insisted, her mandibles clicking rapidly. Before they reach our borders. My forces can intercept them within 48 hours. Your forces number 3,000 combat vessels, Corlin replied coldly. Their fleet appears to exceed 400,000. I am ancient, delegate, but I can still count. Then we mobilize the full Council fleet. Every species contributes ships. We outnumber them if we combine our strength. Do we? Morath finally spoke, his voice cutting through the argument. Look at the display, delegate. Look at what we are facing. The tactical projection still hung above the chamber, continuously updating as more human ships emerged from the void. The numbers had not stopped climbing. 400,000 had become 450,000 carriers, destroyers, dreadnoughts, and something else at the fleet's heart that the sensors could not identify. They have been building for 18 months, Morath continued. Every human, every resource, every moment. While we celebrated their collapse, they were preparing for war. Then what do you propose? Vreth demanded. I propose we learn exactly what we are dealing with before we commit to a course of action that cannot be undone. Across council space, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had not died. Humanity had been hiding. And now humanity was coming back with the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. Species that had served under council authority for millennia began asking uncomfortable questions. If the humans could defy the established order, who else might follow? On a dozen worlds, underground movements that had accepted permanent defeat suddenly found new hope. The myth of council invincibility had been shattered. Something fundamental had shifted in the balance of power. Scholar Merrick watched the chaos unfold from his quarters on the Veldrani homeworld. He had risked everything to help Elena Voss. Now he saw the results playing out across every communication channel. He sent a single encrypted message to human intelligence. The mask is slipping. They are more afraid than they show. Aboard the flagship USS Prometheus. Admiral Reyes monitored the Council's response with grim satisfaction. Border patrols are mobilizing, reported Commander Lisa Eulerin, his tactical officer. Approximately 3,000 vessels taking defensive positions. 3,000 against 400,000, Reyes said quietly. They know they cannot stop us. This is posturing. What about the unidentified object? Asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the fleet's chief scientist. They are attempting long-range scans. Let them scan. They will not understand what they are looking at. The object in question hung at the center of humanity's formation. It was the size of a small moon, covered in geometric patterns that pulsed with strange energy. The Council's most advanced sensors could detect its presence, but could not determine its function. They called it Prometheus, not after the flagship, but after the ancient myth of the being who gave fire to humanity. This was humanity's fire, a weapon built from the combined knowledge of 7 extinct species, each one eliminated by the Council over the past 300,000 years. Elena Voss had returned to human-controlled space, but she had not finished her work in Council territory. She maintained contact with sympathetic elements throughout the Empire, feeding information back to Fleet Command. Representative Holleth of the Von Concordat had approached her before she left. The Von had chafed under Council rule for 800 years. They saw opportunity in the current crisis. If your fleet were to distinguish between those who ordered your extinction and those who merely failed to prevent it, Holleth had suggested carefully. There is a human expression, Elena had replied. When someone tells you what they would have done to you if they had the power, believe them. The Council told us exactly what we were worth. We are simply responding in kind. But she had not refused the conversation. Seeds were being planted. The Council's fragile unity would face another test. Before this was over, 60 hours remained until the human fleet reached Council borders. In the Grand Chamber. The debates continued with increasing desperation. Vreth demanded war. Corlin urged negotiation. A third faction had formed around species that wanted to surrender immediately rather than risk destruction. High Chancellor Morath called for a recess. The delegates dispersed to their private quarters, leaving him alone in the vast chamber with his advisors. Show me everything we have on their fleet, Moreth ordered. The display shifted to focus on individual vessels. The Veldrani had maintained the most sophisticated surveillance network in the galaxy for 300,000 years. They knew every ship design used by every species. They did not recognize these ships. The hull configurations do not match any known template, his chief analyst reported. The power signatures suggest reactor technology significantly more advanced than our own. And the weapon systems? The analyst paused. We cannot identify the weapon systems. How is this possible? Morith demanded. They were a young species. They had access only to technology we provided. They found something else. Or someone helped them. Who would dare? The analyst hesitated. There are references in our archives to species we eliminated centuries ago. The Volscian, the Kareth. We destroyed their civilizations, but we never recovered all the research facilities. If the humans found those sites, Morith felt something he had not experienced in 4,000 years of leadership. Genuine fear. He had ordered the extinction of humanity because they seemed too dangerous to allow to develop. Now he understood just how right that assessment had been. But it was too late. The directive had been signed. The humans knew. And now 400,000 ships were coming to deliver their answer. On the human flagship, Admiral Reyes received a priority communication from Elena Voss. The Council is fracturing, she reported. Some want to fight. Some want to surrender. Most are paralyzed by indecision. Good. Let them argue. Every hour they spend debating is an hour they are not preparing. There is something else. Elena's voice grew serious. Moreth has requested a private channel. He wants to negotiate directly with you. What are his terms? He has not stated any. I believe he wants to understand what we truly want before committing to anything. Reyes considered this. The old serpent was buying time, certainly. But perhaps the time could be useful. Tell him I will speak with him in 12 hours. Let him wonder what we are planning until then. Understood. Reyes closed the channel and turned to look at the viewport. The stars stretched out before him, ancient and cold. Somewhere among them lay Earth, empty and waiting. Sir, Commander Eulerin spoke quietly. Do you think they will actually surrender? Some will. Others will need convincing. And if they choose to fight? Reyes looked at the distant shape of Prometheus, the weapon that could unmake stars. Then we show them why that was a mistake. The fleet continued its advance. 72 hours had become 60. The countdown continued. And in the void between the stars, the universe held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when humanity finally came home. 36. Hours remained when Admiral Reyes finally accepted high. Chancellor Moreth's communication. Request, the Serpentine leader of the Veldrani, appeared on the flagship's main display, his angular features betraying none of the fear that Reyes knew lurked beneath. Admiral Reyes, Moreth began, his voice carefully controlled. I appreciate your willingness to speak. Speak quickly, High Chancellor. My schedule is limited. Moreth inclined his head slightly. You must understand our position. The Council has maintained peace in this galaxy for 300,000 years. We have prevented countless wars. We have brought stability to thousands of species. You have maintained control, Reyes corrected. There is a difference. Perhaps. But control has kept the galaxy from destroying itself. Surely you can see the value in that. I can see the value in survival. That is why we are here. Moreth leaned forward slightly. Your fleet can destroy us. I accept that reality. But what happens after? You will inherit ruins. You will spend centuries fighting the remnants of our civilization. You will become exactly what you claim to oppose. Is that a threat, High Chancellor? It is a fact. I am offering an alternative. The Council can be reformed. The directive against your species can be rescinded. New structures can be created that include humanity as equal partners. Reyes was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was cold. 18 months ago, you signed a document ordering the death of 8 billion people. My people, my family. Now you offer partnership. He shook his head slowly. Do you know what humanity has learned from the Council, High Chancellor? Enlighten me. We learned that words mean nothing. Treaties mean nothing. Promises mean nothing. The only thing that matters in this galaxy is power. You taught us that lesson very well. Then what do you want? I want you to be afraid. I want you to feel what we felt when we discovered that our allies were planning our extinction. I want every species in this council to understand that humanity will never be helpless again. Morth's eyes narrowed. You speak of deterrence. I speak of consequences. Reyes nodded to his tactical officer. Dr. Tanaka, begin the demonstration. The display shifted to show a star system deep in Council territory. It was uninhabited, but strategically positioned, used as a waypoint for military patrols. The star you are observing is designated K7792 in your catalogs, Reyes announced. His words were being broadcast across every Council frequency. Every species in the galaxy was watching. In 60 seconds, it will no longer exist. Morth's composure finally cracked. You cannot destroy a star. No technology in the galaxy is capable of such a thing. Your technology is not capable. Ours is. The weapon called Prometheus came to life. Energy pulsed through the geometric patterns on its surface. Something vast and terrible reached out across the light years, touching the distant star with invisible fingers. K7792 began to tremble in the grand chamber. Every delegate watched in horrified silence as the star tore itself apart. Not a supernova. Not a natural process. The star simply came undone, its matter scattering into the void like sand blown by wind, and then it was gone. A star that had burned for 4 billion years, extinguished in moments. Reyes spoke into the silence that followed. We built this weapon from the remains of species you destroyed. The Volscian contributed the theoretical framework. The Kareth provided the energy matrix. The Hollow Minds designed the targeting system. You thought you erased them from existence. You were wrong. Ambassador Corlin's ancient stone face showed something it had not displayed in 4,000 years. Terror. This is genocide, he rumbled. You are threatening to destroy entire civilizations. We are demonstrating that we can. What happens next depends entirely on your choices. High Chancellor Morth had gone pale. His serpentine body coiled tightly around his throne as he struggled to process what he had witnessed. What do you want? He asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. Complete disarmament. Not just military forces, shipyards, weapons programs, research facilities. Everything that allowed you to threaten us. You are asking us to make ourselves defenseless. I am asking you to trust us the way you asked us to trust you. Reyes let the irony hang in the air. The fleet will cross your border in 36 hours. You have until then to vote on our terms. The communication ended in the grand chamber. Chaos erupted once again. But this time, the arguments had a different quality. Fear had replaced anger. Desperation had replaced arrogance. Delegate Vreth still demanded war, but fewer species rallied to her call. The demonstration had shown them exactly what they were facing. This was not a military conflict. They could win through numbers. Or strategy. This was extinction staring back at them. Ambassador Corrin spoke for the moderate faction. We must accept their terms. Pride is meaningless if we are all dead. Accept surrender? Vreth shrieked. The Council has ruled this galaxy for 300,000 years. We cannot simply bow to a species that was crawling in mud when we achieved spaceflight. They are not crawling now, and their weapon makes our fleets irrelevant. The debate raged for hours. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves forced to choose sides. Ancient alliances fractured. New coalitions formed around the desperate need for survival. High Chancellor Morath watched it all unfold, knowing that whatever happened, his era of leadership was ending. The Veldrani had ruled through strength and fear. Now a greater strength had emerged, and the fear belonged to them. Elena Voss monitored the proceedings from a secure location in human-controlled space. She had done her part. The intelligence network she had built over 18 months had made all of this possible. But watching the council tear itself apart brought no satisfaction. This was not victory. This was survival. The two were not the same thing. She received a communication from Admiral Reyes. The vote will happen within the hour. Are you ready for what comes next? I am ready to do what is necessary. Elena. Reyes paused. Thank you. For everything. She closed the channel without responding. There would be time for gratitude later. If there was a later dot, the vote came as the human fleet reached the council's border. 400,000 ships held position, weapons armed, waiting for the result dot in the Grand Chamber. High Chancellor Morath called for the final count. 846 species voted for acceptance of human terms. 112 voted for war. The remainder abstained. It was over. Morath announced the result, in a voice drained of all authority. The Galactic Council accepts humanity's demands. We will disarm. We will restructure. We will submit to oversight. On the flagship, Admiral Reyes received the transmission. He sank back into his command chair, feeling the weight of 18 months finally lifting from his shoulders. Stand down, Prometheus, he ordered. Hold position at the border. Commander Eulerin looked at him. Sir, we won? We survived. Reyes looked at the stars that would not die today. The winning comes later. He opened a channel to the fleet. 400,000 ships. Millions of humans who had sacrificed everything for this moment. All ships, this is Admiral Reyes. The Council has accepted our terms. We are going home. The cheering that erupted across the fleet could be heard on every frequency. Humanity had vanished quietly. They had returned with thunder, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first human ships entered the Sol system on a quiet morning in March. Rosa Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the transport vessel, watching Earth grow larger through the viewport. She was 29 years old. She had been 11 when the evacuation began. For most of her life, Earth had been nothing more than a story, a promise that kept her people working through the darkness. Now it was real. Blue oceans and green continents and white clouds, exactly like the pictures she had studied as a child. Exactly like her parents had described in the long nights when hope seemed impossible. It is smaller than I imagined, she said to her mother beside her. Everything is smaller when you finally see it. Her mother took her hand. But it is ours. It has always been ours. The colonists began landing within ours. Cities that had stood empty for nearly 2 decades came alive with light and sound. Billions of people returning to the world they had left behind, carrying 18 years of sacrifice in their hearts. Rosa walked through streets her grandmother had described, but she had never seen. She touched buildings that were older than the Council's first contact with humanity. She stood on soil that her ancestors had tilled for 10,000 years. She was home. But not everyone accepted the new order peacefully. Delegate Vreth had refused to acknowledge the Council's surrender. She gathered the remaining hardliners and seized control of 3 star systems in the outer territories. declaring herself the true authority of the Galactic Council. The human response was swift, but measured. Admiral Reyes deployed surgical strike forces against military installations, avoiding civilian targets entirely. Ground troops supported local resistance movements that had suffered under Vreth's authority for centuries. The campaign lasted 3 weeks. Vreth was captured alive and brought before a joint tribunal of human and alien judges. Elena Voss sat among those judges. She had seen Vreth across the Grand Chamber dozens of times, listened to her demand humanity's destruction with cold indifference. Now the insectoid delegate stood in chains, her compound eyes blazing with hatred. "You had no right," Vreth spat. "We built this galaxy. We maintained order for 300,000 years. You maintained control," Elena replied calmly. "Order requires consent. What you had was submission." The tribunal sentenced Vreth to exile in a sector now governed by species she had once oppressed. She would spend the remainder of her life under the authority of those she had considered beneath notice. It was not kind, but it was just. 1 year after the surrender, the Galactic Council reconvened in a new chamber built on neutral ground. The old hierarchy had been dismantled. High Chancellor Morith had stepped down. His species' 300,000-year dominance finally ended. In his place, a rotating council of representatives from a dozen species, now guided galactic affairs. Ambassador Elena Voss took her seat among equals. Beside her sat Marcus Webb, now 93 years old and serving as elder advisor to the human delegation. He had lived long enough to see everything they had worked for become reality. The first matter of business was the adoption of a new constitution guaranteeing the rights of all species. No more extinction directives. No more quiet eliminations of inconvenient civilizations. Every species, regardless of age or development, would be protected under the same laws. Will it last? Marcus asked Elena after the session ended. "I do not know," she admitted. "But it is a better foundation than what came before." She helped him to his feet. His body was failing, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had guided humanity through its darkest hour. "You know," he said quietly, "I never thought I would live to see this day." "Neither did I. But you did the work anyway. All those years in council space, building networks, gathering intelligence. You never knew if any of it would matter." Elena looked out at the new chamber, at the representatives of 800 species learning to work together as partners instead of subjects. "I knew it mattered. I just did not know if we would survive to see the results." Marcus smiled. "That is the human condition, I think. Working for a future we might never witness." He patted her hand. "I am proud of you, Elena. Your father would be too." She did not answer. Some things were too heavy for words. Not everyone found peace in the aftermath. Admiral Reyes retired from military command, but he carried Prometheus with him. Every night he dreamed of the star he had destroyed. One star, uninhabited, a demonstration, but his weapon could have destroyed hundreds, thousands. He had held the power to commit genocide on a galactic scale. He visited David Okafor at a small house on the coast of what was once West Africa. David had designed Prometheus, built it, activated it. He understood the burden better than anyone. They sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over an ocean that had nearly been lost forever. "Do you regret it?" Reyes asked every moment. David's voice was quiet but steady. "But I would do it again." "How do you live with that?" "I remind myself what the alternative was. 8 billion people dead. Earth sterilized. Everything we ever were erased from the galaxy." David looked at his old commander. "The Council taught us that power is the only thing that matters. We learned the lesson. Now we have to learn a better one." "What lesson is that?" how to hold power without becoming what we fought against. They sat in silence as the stars emerged overhead. Two men who had saved their species and lost something of themselves in the process. 20 years after the return. Rosa Vasquez taught at the academy on Mars. Her students were the first generation to grow up after the war, in a galaxy that treated humans as citizens rather than threats. They had never known the fear that had driven their parents and grandparents. They had never counted ships in a desperate race against extinction. A young man named Jakob raised his hand during a lecture on galactic history. Professor, was it worth it? The hiding? The weapons? The threats? Rosa considered her answer carefully. She was almost 50 years old now. She had seen more than most would in 3 lifetimes. I used to count ships, she said finally. When I was young, I kept a notebook with the number of vessels we completed each day. I knew exactly how many weapons we were building to destroy the people who wanted to destroy us. She paused. I do not count anymore. But was it worth it? Jakob pressed. You are asking if survival is worth the cost of surviving. Rosa looked at her students, their faces bright with curiosity and hope. The answer is always yes. And the cost is always higher than you expect. Then what do we do with that? We build something that justifies what was paid. Something our grandchildren can look at and say, this is why they fought. And if we cannot? Rosa smiled softly. Then we keep trying. That is what it means to be human. On the edge of the Sol system, where the Exodus fleet had first emerged from the void, there stood a memorial dot. It was simple. A ring of stone bearing the names of every human who had died during the exile, the construction, the war. Millions of names carved into eternal rock, orbiting the sun in silent testimony. A plaque marked the center of the ring. Humanity vanished quietly. Humanity returned loudly. We are still here, below it. In smaller letters, for the children of Earth and the children yet to come. May you never need to build what we built. May you never need to do what we did. But if you must, remember, survival is not surrender, and peace is not defeat. The memorial orbited in eternal silence, watching over the world that had nearly been lost. And behind it, the stars shone on a galaxy forever changed. A galaxy that had learned an ancient truth the hard way. The quiet ones are not always the weak ones. And the laughter of tyrants has a way of dying in their throats when they finally see what they have awakened. Humanity had asked for nothing but the chance to exist. The council had denied them even that dot, so humanity had taken what they needed, built what they required, and returned to claim what was always theirs, a place among the stars, a future for their children, a galaxy that would never forget their name.